right, so welcome everyone to our first annual Changeathon. So we're super excited to have everyone here. My name is Melissa and I'm the host of this great culture change hackathon brought to you by Cultivate. For those that are new here, Cultivate, we're a small consulting company who works with department leaders to amplify the energy and ideas to empower everything from learning and designing as well as community building. And so we're really excited to bring everyone here and share with you a little bit about what our Cultivators Community is all about. We started as a way to create space for explorers and people who are really excited to take action. And we want to support them to create great things within their organizations. So as a friendly reminder, we would love to learn who's here. Please share a little bit about yourself in the chat. We would love to know your name, title and company, how'd you hear about this event? And of course, as I mentioned before, brownie points for anyone that is working on anything in their organization and would like to share that with us. So before we come to our pictures, we're just gonna remind everyone that we really focus on empowering people that are in large organizations to create significant impact. And we're really excited because we really believe that anyone at any position in any size company can make a significant impact, and we would love to help you do that. As a friendly reminder, this pitchathon, or changeathon, sorry, is focused less on the pitch itself, but more so how we can help the pitchers themselves make progress in their idea. So this is a two-part event. The first one, the one that you're at right now, will be focused on sharing what the pitchers are working on. And then the second one, the follow-up event, which will be next Wednesday, will focus on the progress that they've made thanks to your feedback, ideas, and questions. So we really ask you to share the feedback, resources, and ask the questions, as that really helps our pitchers, and also to be kind and constructive. And so without any further ado, we would love to introduce our first pitcher, Ajita. Awesome. Are you ready, Ajita?
Yes. Thank you, Melissa, and thank you everybody for joining. My name is Ajita Dash, and I work at Takeda Pharmaceuticals in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I am a director in the Translational Sciences Group, which is part of the Oncology Drug Discovery Unit. And I heard about Changeathon from my colleague, Nick Heath, who's actually one of the participants, and he's been connected to Cultivate. So this was a easy connection. So my change initiation pitch or initiative is around career development and career growth. So when most people think about career growth, I think most of us think about promotions and how we can climb the corporate ladder. But I don't think career growth is limited to promotions and climbing a hierarchical ladder, but could also involve lateral growth or exploring alternate career paths. And this alternate career paths would allow an individual to gain new skills, could allow individual development. However, seldom individuals explore such alternate career paths. And I want to understand whether there are barriers to such career growth and that prevent people from exploring these options. So the questions I have to the audience are, what tools can I use to understand whether barriers to career change, career explorations exist? Who within my organization would be ideal to help me understand this better? Who should I be connecting with to understand this better? And can understanding the journey of people who have made a successful career change help me understand these barriers, or do I have to speak to people who have tried but haven't failed or haven't even tried? And what support from organizations might foster such career explorations? I think this is a benefit to organizations as well, as learning new skills, exploring different career options could actually increase employee engagement and productivity, and even increase retention. So that is my pitch, and I would really like to get your questions, support, input on this.
Awesome. So thank you so much. So we're going to start with our questions and feedback. I'm just going to go through the chat here. And so John said, defining barriers, I think that there's a stigma around lateral moves or downward moves, too much emphasis on linear progression of a resume and CV. I think that's a really interesting point there. What do you think, Ajita?
Yes, that's definitely a great point. So is this sort of a change that needs to be made industry-wise, such that people who see these changes in career don't look at it as a negative? How can one sort of couch such changes in a positive way?
Ajita, do you see that often that like these barriers are earlier on in people's careers or later or a mix?
That's a great question, and maybe that's something that I can explore, and those are questions to ask. I don't know. I mean, I personally have explored career changes several years ago, and I'm doing so again. So, you know, it can happen at any stage in the career, but that's a great question.
Yeah, I know that when I was with Comcast, there were ERGs or employment resource groups, such as the Young Professionals Network at Comcast, that really focus exactly on what it is that you were talking about, of helping young professionals within Comcast that see how it is that they can grow in their career, what professional development skills they had. We also have a few comments here. Annette said that it would be interesting to talk to 3 groups of people: those that have been successful at making moves, those that haven't, and those that are not trying to make moves because of perceived barriers. So that's really interesting. Chris also shares that it would be helpful to do some discovery activities within your group to create inventory of the types of incentives currently available to people, regarding career change, lateral or otherwise, to understand.
Is this sort of reaching out to HR to understand what these incentives might be, or?
I think that would be interesting. I'm curious to hear what Chris, feel free to share that in the chat.
I'm sorry, Melissa, should just in chat, or should I chime in?
No, you're live. Here we go. Let's go.
Here we are. I just wondered if, I think HR would be a great group to talk to, right? Because HR a lot of times will have formal kinds of incentives around these things. But I know, I mean, Takeda is an enormous org, right? I've worked with just R&D, and that group alone is very, very large. So there might also be departmental kinds of, and I'm talking about incentives in a lot of ways, right? It could be the obvious things like promotions and, you know, monetary support and things like that, right? But mentorship programs, development programs, job shadowing programs, anything like that that might exist at the department level would also potentially be useful to know about.
Right, that's a good point. Yes, I had a question as what you meant by incentives, but job shadowing is probably a great opportunity to at least take the first step.
Yes. Please feel free, for anyone that has any feedback, questions, or resources, please share them in the chat. Clement shared that there's a lot of cross-career skills that may not be technical, such as writing, communication, management, and interpersonality skills. Reading fast is hard for me. So that's great. Emma also shared that I find more people who share their non-traditional journeys are better. Especially from within the organization. It destigmatizes making lateral moves, which is a great point as well.
Right, and that's sort of one of the things that attracted me. Making non-traditional career changes actually might help you grow or develop broadly and provide a broad base for what you can do or where you can move to. So, you know, the point that was raised about maybe it might not be looked well on a resume, perhaps it's the way you might be able to spin it as well. You know, if you can show that what you have done actually provides input to your prior career path, or you know, the ways where it has allowed you to develop, that could be something that could be done as well.
Awesome. All right, and then we also have a few notes here as well. John said that maybe some tweaks in the terminology could be helpful. Maybe career curiosity would be interesting, or career journey. I think that's really interesting. And I think that this topic in itself comes in an interesting time, because our economy is focused very much on gigs, and a lot of younger talent kind of career hop is another way to look at it. So they'll jump to a bunch of different companies, and they're not staying longer in larger organizations as their parents or grandparents, where they've stayed at a company for 10, 20, 50 years. And so I think that being able to focus on how young people especially can grow within a large organization allows to reduce churn, and reduce a lot of people that tend to leave because they don't feel like they can grow here.
Right.
Annette, yes. Annette also shares that you may want to think about your company's culture. In some companies, you need a quote sponsor who can open opportunities for people, and in others, taking a lateral move after reaching a certain level in your career is looked upon as less than successful.
That's a good point. When you've sort of attained a certain level, why are you looking for change? Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Nick also shared that encourage individuals to explore creating their own future is something that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, and the stigma doesn't help. Moves can be a great boost for career if the long term is considered. So he also supports the career curiosity that John mentioned earlier. So does Molly.
Great points. Thank you.
I think I could jump in a little bit because the software I'm working on helps undergraduate students figure out what they want to do with their life, is what we say. And it's a lot of stigma around, even from a young age, like 17, 18, like you have to have it figured out. You have to know exactly what you're going to do. So when you graduate, you're going in that direction. When the future of work and how we're seeing our economy and our workforce adjust isn't going that way. I think Melissa said it very well, in that our parents and the older generation had 40 plus years. They claimed their social security and they were content with that. But I think as we're starting to see the younger generations come up, one, we're seeing a generation that isn't as willing to commit 20 years to a corporation. They're more willing to commit 1 or 2 years. But then two, they're not satisfied and they're not happy. And I think we're looking at a new generation that prioritizes work-life balance and happiness, and what are they enjoying over that monetary, compensation. So I think it's all super interesting going to the next stages, and it's a stigma now, but will it be a stigma for those students in school? So it's an interesting conversation, but that's what I've seen on our end, is really trying to tell. I saw it in the chat, helping 20-year-olds figure it out. It's that stigma that it's okay to not know and not have it figured out, and don't, put so much pressure to have it. No one knows what they want to do when they grow up.
Absolutely. I think, at any stage in your career, you're still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. So it's not just the young people. But another question to sort of career hopping, is there too short of a time? Is there something that's too short of a time in staying in a position, or isn't there? Like if you stay someplace too short, does it not allow you to build a foundation, or is that not a consideration?
That's a great question. And I know that for anyone that's looking for a job, people do look at resumes and says like, hey, you only stayed at a company for under 2 years. Usually what I've heard, and I would love to hear from the community, usually under 2 years, especially larger organizations kind of look at that funny, especially if you're a young person too. So we have a lot of really great feedback here in the chat, which Ajita will have access to later. So please feel free to keep sharing your questions and responses and feedback. We're actually gonna jump on. So thank you, Ajita. We're gonna do a round of applause at the end of it, and we're gonna welcome Savannah next. So Savannah.
Hello, everyone. So nice to see you. Thank you so much for coming to hear all of our pitches today. Okay, so my name is Savannah Staley. I'm the AP ELA for Langen Lit at Lead Southeast High School here in Nashville. It's a charter school. I'm also the content lead for the English department team and the grade level chair. So during virtual learning, our clubs have looked a little bit different, and we have a really small school. And why clubs are so important for our kids is because we don't really have very many sports or other opportunities for them to really build their resumes. So clubs are really important for us. And we've had a lot of difficulty sort of creating clubs and also bringing kids in and wanting them to get engaged and participate in clubs. So I have a new idea for a club. And I'm excited to propose it today. So the club is around courageous conversations. And what I have noticed, so there's a lack of participation, like I mentioned, in after school clubs already. They're Wednesdays after school, so kids are not required to be at school during that time, obviously. Students desire to make real change within their world and community. So in my AP Lang and Lit classes, it's really all about being a global citizen and being aware of the world that we live in. So I notice, especially in our like Socratic seminar Harkness discussions, kids really enjoying having these meaningful conversations about really big ticket topics such as the education system and their feelings about how antiquated it is, or the history of standardized testing or systems of oppression, unpacking the why behind racial injustice, etc. They love to share their personal experiences. I work almost with all Black and Brown students. Most of them are also immigrant and refugees. And so they have a lot of knowledge to share and many different experiences to bring to the table. And they love to share those experiences, but that doesn't always fit our curriculum. So I've just been thinking about ways that I can engage that kind of conversation for students outside of the classroom and really get them to be excited about participating in a club like this. So what I've kind of thought about this club might look like so far. So I think each month it could sort of have a theme on one of these big ticket topics that were named in the previous slides, or really whatever kids are bringing to the table. I was thinking we could maybe have some sort of conversational podcast that we share with our school community that's really student-led and student-focused. My kids don't read the news other than social media, and we talk a lot about, especially in AP Lang, how problematic that is. A lot of them are turning 18 soon too, so when it comes to voting, all those kinds of things, just getting their news from reliable sources is important. So we've kind of played with the idea of making our own like school Instagram news feed where kids are reading articles each week and then making it digestible and turning it into a feed that kids would be receptive to and could engage with. Student-led professional development. So I really want to prioritize student voice. I don't think that we as teachers listen enough to our students. I would love to bring this group of students into our professional development so teachers could hear from them sometimes. Collaborating with community. So it's kind of COVID, but I think that this club could pair with nonprofits. There's a nonprofit here in Nashville called Awake that I've been talking to. Small businesses. There's a company that a friend of mine runs that's called Courage Collective. That's really about having courageous conversations. I think that just kind of getting kids out in the community, real world experience, allowing things to be more hands-on would be really great. And then the last thing, student-focused conversation. So every day we start with our homeroom from 8 to 8:30. We call it crew. As a teacher, you run with your homeroom, hopefully those 4 years, so it really kind of becomes your community of kids that's really familial. I would love to have that student, there are those students who were in this Courageous Conversations Club, to be really the focus and the kind of the leaders for this club for other homerooms. So maybe every Friday we have like a difficult or courageous conversation around a topic, and my kids are really the ones that lead that topic and bring students in. Last quick slide, problems that I foresee. So lack of student interest via Zoom. Like I said, I think when kids are in the building and things are in person, it's a lot easier to have engagement and initiation around these kinds of clubs, and it's really tough via Zoom. High schoolers are super awkward. Usually I only see like the top of their heads and above on Zoom the whole day. So really getting them to actually participate and speak even for like a grade is so tough. So I've been thinking about like how I could get them to be motivated to be in a club like this. Cultivating a courageous and vulnerable community in a virtual setting. So in order to have these kinds of conversations, it would be important that we first created a level of trust with one another and kind of had some guidelines for what these kinds of conversations and action taking might look like. So I'm thinking about that and kind of how to create that community via Zoom. Fundraising, I don't think that's really something that we would need to think about right now or initially, but it's really hard for our kids to fundraise at our school. I still don't really understand why, but they have to jump through like a whole bunch of hoops, whether it's a dance or anything that they want to put on, and it's really tough for them to do that, which often deters them from having community events. Teacher-led, it should not be teacher-led, it should be student-driven. So student voice is really the priority. I have a lot of, I don't have very much bandwidth left, and I have a lot of different hats I'm kind of wearing at school right now. So really making sure that the kids are the ones that are carrying the weight of this. And then lastly, lack of consistency. So I would really want to make sure that the same kids are showing up every week. It wouldn't be like 2 kids one week, 8 the next. It would be kind of hard for it to be, super kind of congruent each week. And so I think consistency is key there as well.
Awesome. We are at time. Sorry, didn't.
Perfect. That's the end.
Great. So we have a lot of really great thoughts and feedback and great idea that you shared here. So Clement shared that considering the agenda of upcoming topics and getting input on voting which topics are of interest, I think that's a great way of getting buy-in from the students, because they're going to be talking about the things that they want to talk about. And I've actually personally have hosted a business meetup group at a previous startup that I had, and everyone was able to submit their own topics, and then everyone took turns like kind of voting for 2 topics, and whichever got the most votes were the focus of the chat that week. Yeah, and so John also shared that the thought on branding courageous conversation feels a little bit intimidating and sets the bar high. Maybe just focusing on calling it Conversations Club. Antoinette shared that podcast, creating an online community, and real-world learning sounds like great ideas. Think about using free online tools to help students make short videos and animations to introduce the topics, make it more like what they're doing on social media now, and that would be a great way to draw them in. Any thoughts so far, Savannah?
Yeah, these are great ideas. Love it.
Awesome. And fellow pitcher, Emma shared that I wonder if it's possible to check out the output on these conversations to tangible change within the schools. Is there a chance to affect real policy change or implement a new school-wide initiative out of the club? I used to work with students in an undergrad level, and there was always much more excited to participate when they can see the effects happening in their school.
Yeah, I think where that's something that I've thought about, we have like a leadership class as well. And so I really want to make sure that this club wouldn't be like overstepping that, because our like student government, they kind of take a lot of pride within like the initiatives that they're kind of already making within the school. But I do think tying it to some sort of tangible, clear outcome for the kids would be important.
Yeah, and another way to avoid stepping on it is collaboration and saying, hey, we would love to do this. What do you think? And I don't know how friendly your school is, but just an idea. Collaboration is always easier, and it cuts down on funding. Chris shared that I think your focus on making something I think your focus on making something like this is student-led at its core, so it's so important. I read an article about something like this recently related to an open, courageous conversation-based program on positive sex education that could be a great source for inspiration. She's going to try and find it. and hopefully we'll be able to send it to you. I do know Chris personally, so we will get that to you. Nick also shared that connecting with organizations or local rep for fundraising has typically helped with fundraising tips, tricks, and tools. Okay. Alexandria also shared that for monthly themes, maybe consider bringing in an expert in a particular space, talk to the group, and kick off the conversation. Oh, Clem shared a few examples. This may be a little too structured, but in building ecosystems or consulting, we often do persona mapping, incentives, deliverables, and OKRs. If you teach the students that, they'll be great at business and startups, so that's really cool. An example would be a persona could be a student who is interested in X, Y, and Z topic, incentivized by having recognized or connecting with like-minded peers on interesting topics, deliver more on downloadables and connecting content with OKRs of increasing number of students and joining clubs.
Yeah.
I don't,
Oh, go ahead, Melissa.
I was gonna say, I don't mean to volunteer Clement, but I think it would be great if you guys connect after this, because he sounds like he has a lot of great ideas for you.
Yeah, I like that too, because so last year one of the I didn't get to end up going because of COVID, but we planned a big field trip to the Entrepreneur Center in Nashville, and my students each created their own small businesses within teams and then pitched them. And we were going to do it at the EC, and then students got to kind of vote on the best small business. And we talked a lot about, I'm an English teacher, so it was a lot about writing, and writing for business was kind of the focus. And there was so much excitement about that field trip, and I don't see that often within kids. So I think kind of introducing them to new ideas of like what it could look like for them to go into different professional fields, and especially see people who look like them in those fields, is really, really important to me. So if anybody has any connections to anybody that's interesting, that would be great. I would love that.
Yeah. Steve actually shared a few things that he mentioned, things like Among Us, Fortnite, TikTok. Steve, do you mind jumping on to share a little bit about that? I feel like you have a lot of great ideas to connect with kids here.
I'm just playing with the chat. Yeah, no, my only point was, like, I think the compass is good, and all the stuff Clemens was talking about the why, really good. So I was just trying to challenge on format. Like, I'm not a student, so I don't know, but as an adult, like, who supposedly has a bigger attention span, I just hate being on Zoom more than I have to be. And so trying to be off Zoom maybe is a good idea, and think about where are there social spaces and other things where people might chat anyway in a more casual setting, and how you might facilitate those in those types of ways. I'm guessing stereotypical ones of my, person in his 30s thinks what kids do. So I don't know the actuals, those probably all sound dumb, but like there may be actuals there that you know about that could be interesting. Or just asking them of like, what are the ways you're socially, virtually hanging out with your friends now? And like, not that we're trying to encroach on that time, but we might be able to just facilitate that time better than you just like talking about stupid stuff or fart jokes or whatever teenagers talk about, and like talk about real things. So
Totally. I think it's interesting, this generation, they don't do well on Zoom, but they're always on FaceTime. Like, I'll be teaching a class and their phone is just on their desk with just somebody that they're talking to in the abyss. Like, they're not communicating at all, but they have to be connected to someone at all times. But Zoom is really hard. And I don't know if it's just because like somebody's staring at your face all day. And so just kind of thinking about that in regards to teenagers is tough. But we have an Among Us virtual lunch hour every week. So, you're on the right track, Steve, with that idea. I like the TikTok idea too.
You strike me as a bit of an imposter, so it works.
So Avo shared that he loves the idea of creating a safe space for young people. As someone, side note, as someone that talks to a lot of young people, they love safe spaces. And I think we all need more of that. But how about calling it a chat club, something less formal and friendlier? A lot of people shared different techniques, such as maybe you could do like a popcorn style, to call it, Lelaine shared, do a popcorn to call it the next person, like in a challenge using a video. Nick also shared, take a look at the possible project out of the Boston area. So that might be something that you can model it after. Jessica said, off of Steve, there is an app that is chatting with Biden using his campaign. She cannot remember it right now, but she will look it up and share it with us.
It was Biden used it during his campaign
Oh,
to
got it.
communicate with Gen Zers, and I think just going through TikTok, I think he did a really decent job at there's a chat box and there's a little guy who just goes around and tries to kill like 100 other guys, but they use it as a text communication. The chat box is more important, and there's like a penguin one too. There's like 3 apps that they use that would be a good resource. I'm trying to find it right now.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a lot of people have a lot of great ideas and strategies on how to go meet them where they are, which is really important, especially when you're especially when you're working with younger generation. I did also notice someone suggested, hey, there's a lot of things you can try for your bandwidth. John did. Maybe pick one and start and see where it goes. I'm sure, Savannah, you have a good relationship with maybe like a few of the students, getting their input and getting them involved in the planning and structure of this makes them feel more empowered and more personally invested in it. And then we also have a few people that are sharing articles and resources, which is really helpful. Does anyone else have any questions for Savannah? We have less than a minute. No pressure or anything. You can always ask more questions after. All right. So we're going to prepare. Thank you so much, Savannah. Emma, are you ready to roll? All right.
I am, and I am the only person who didn't prepare a presentation. Now I feel like a slacker a little bit, so off to a rough start. But hi, everyone. I'm Emma. I am based in Montreal, Canada, and I am the head of people and culture at a startup called Local Logic. We work in the prop tech space. So our mission is to quantify the value of location. So basically, if you drop a point on a map anywhere in the world or anywhere right now in North America, we want to be able to tell you kind of quantifiably how it feels to live there. So rating things with like lifestyle scores, and giving you a sense of, you know, how quiet it is, how vibrant it is, kind of the infrastructure that's around that. So working in kind of the real estate space, but as a startup. We recently closed our Series A and just announced it this week. So really exciting to have a little bit more money to work with now. And that's kind of what is really underscoring the project that I'm going to talk about, which is a values refresh. So the company's been around since 2014. I've been at the company 2 years. The original set of company values that you see on the wall of any startup that you walk into were established around 2015. So they're getting, you know, a little old. And at the time, there were only 7 people in the company, and our headcount is now 26 and growing very quickly. So we figured it was high time to do a little refresh of those values. And what seemed at first like, you know, a quick and easy one-day all-company meeting, we're realizing now is going to be a much more involved process if we really want it to have an impact on the way that we conduct business. So my major objectives with this values refresh project are to, first of all, update the values, bring them to a place where they feel fresh, they don't feel like kind of those stale buzzwords that you see on a lot of different company websites, and also to find more actionable ways for us to kind of integrate those into the working of the company. So for example, one of our values that, you know, will definitely not change is inclusivity. And, you know, we try to live that in all of the ways that we work, but are there things that we could be doing to make our products more accessible? Are there ways that we could be altering the hiring process to make sure that we're attracting diverse sets of candidates, that we're really making our hiring process accessible for everybody? So really looking to find a way that not only we kind of get new shiny words to put on our wall, but that we are actively creating that reflex where all the teams, all the projects, all the initiatives that happen have a quick values check. as part of them, and see how do we kind of bring that in. So I'm really excited to hear from all of you if you have experience either doing a project like this or creating that kind of buy-in across the company for people to have that reflex of integrating the values into everything that they do, or you know, anything in that general kind of space. I would love to hear about it.
Thank you, Emma. I think we have a couple of things in the chat. I just wanted to verify that the URL is locallogic.co. Is that the correct
Yes,
URL?
it is. Yeah, the CO always throws people off, but yeah, it is .co.
Yeah, awesome. Clemens, I just put that in the chat for you if you want to check it out.
Also, in the chat, we do have a shout out for Montreal. So shout out for that. We also have someone, sorry, I was going back and forth with one of the people. So we shared your link there. Jimmy asked, is it a rebrand as well?
It's a really great question. We recently hired in June our first ever head of marketing, who is absolutely dynamite, comes to us from some really successful startups out of Montreal and is doing a really great job at pushing kind of a slight rebrand. She and I are working really closely on this because it, of course, is going to be part of our employer brand. It's part of how we connect to the community. So it is going to be both internal and external. Yeah.
Awesome. Lelaine shared that she would start with the persona journey and bringing different voices into the table. Yeah, I think that when you're doing with something like values, obviously it is going to be interesting to say like, hey, like here were the values that we started out with, where are we now? And just trying to find ways to modernize that and or like fill in the gap of like, these are the values that really stuck with us. Do we still care about this right now, or are we are there different ways to kind of pivot that to where the direction we want to go to? Awesome. Does anyone else have any ideas? Great, we have one. Chris, when it comes to making something values, principle, etc., really integrated and actionable for everyone, I'd always advocate getting as many of your people involved in actually generating the content as possible. If the ideas comes from them, you don't have to work so hard to get the folks involved to adapt them and interpret them.
Yeah, I'd love to like add a question to that. I think that's a really great point. You know, getting everybody involved. I have kind of two add-on questions. One is, how do you manage that many voices in the room for something that is so huge and can be such a personal thing, right? Inclusivity means something different to everybody. And then my second question would be accountability. How have any of you had experience kind of holding people accountable? Because I think we're all very good at being like, yeah, I'm totally going to do that. You know, I'm definitely going to check all of my work for accessibility. But accountability becomes really, really difficult. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, Chris, would you like to come off mute and share your thoughts on that?
I'm sure that there are others here who have even more experience than I do in answering some of those things, but I mean, they're hard questions, right? Like there's not going to be just one way to do that. I mean, I definitely think that getting people bought in from the beginning, which is really partly what you're asking about, right? It's not just sort of getting people to buy into the values after you have revamped them, right? But getting them as involved as possible. And it doesn't have to be all at once, right? So breaking people up into smaller groups and sort of approaching them where they are within their departments and teams, or sort of putting together, you know, cross-functional coffee chats about values, right? Things like that, to be able to bring people together in different contexts where they're comfortable, I think is a great way of making them feel involved and actually listening to them and having them be involved. And then the accountability part becomes, you know, not done, but easier, right? Because intrinsic motivation and accountability is always going to be better than like having to impose some kind of accountability, you know, system on top of people afterwards, right? I mean, it'll just never work as well as them coming to the table and being like, oh, heck yeah, I helped write these things, I care about them.
Yeah, I love the idea of breaking it down into like individual chats rather than trying to kind of do it all at once.
Yeah. Fellow pitcher Ajita also shared that perhaps include your customer's voice what do they appreciate most about your company? So that might be interesting. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's also a great way to see brand awareness, like what do they think your company values are, and to see if there is alignment, and how can you realign if there isn't. Clemens shared a great question. So is the outcome to reestablish the mission/vision? Is it focused on long-term strategy, or is it like really restoring faith and leadership? He shared a little bit about this
A great question.
later. Sorry, go on.
No, go for it. Go for it.
He shared that transparency on business process management meetings is useful. C-suite, sharing recordings or notes to prior decisions for those who wants to read up on it.
Yeah, those are great questions. I think, it definitely touches on all of those things. I think the primary outcomes that we're looking for here are to be leaders, kind of thought leaders in the space of values in startups. We really hold that kind of in high regard. We don't want to be people who just sort of slap words on a wall and then carry about our business with no kind of attachment to those things. So it's really bringing us back to that kind of starting point where, we've been around for a little while now. We've raised our Series A. We're getting a lot of momentum. How do we make sure that we don't just leave those things in the dust? And then I think it's also like a uniting thing for everybody in the company, for everybody to really feel that sense of buy-in, like Chris mentioned, to really kind of feel that sense of ownership over those values. And hopefully with that comes that kind of intrinsic accountability to them.
Awesome. So it seems like you're also reading on the side, because someone did say like they're not on the wall. Alex shared a really interesting thing. Alex, are you cool with coming off mute and sharing what you said?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, when our people experience team was involved or working on revamping our values last year, basically they made a mini XFT, and then they brought in various employees for smaller conversations across different teams, across however long they had been at Maverick, to just give live feedback and take that into account while finalizing the changes. So I thought that was really great.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That sounds like a great idea.
I can empathize with kicking off a project thinking that it's going to be a one-day thing and then it being a 3-year thing or whatever. So, congrats on the journey that you're getting started on. I think oftentimes with these, they start with, people have different expectations of what a values project is, or what a set of values are, or why they're going to be used. And so I think being able to paint done of not just what will it look like, where it could look 1,000 different things. Are we writing a purpose statement, a mission statement, a vision statement, all three? Or is it a set of values? Is it a set of commitments? Is it a set of behaviors? Is it all three? Is it like, so one, knowing what the end deliverable we're working towards is important. And I think the best way to know how to do that is to know what are the situations in which we will use this, right? Values are values because they cost you something. Values are values because there's something you do at the expense of doing something else. And so being able to call out, what are the scenarios and situations in which we would turn around and look at them if they're on a wall? What would be examples of times we would want them to be front and center for us when we're doing strategic planning, or when we're doing our OKRs, or when we're doing whatever? And then, okay, if we know that those are the situations in which we would want these to be present, what should they look like, feel like, act like, be like, read like, so that they're useful in those situations? And then we know we can kind of have something that can be useful there. I think it's also really helpful to point out stuff that sucks. We don't want things like this, because sometimes you get what sucks because that's the distillation. Everyone loves doing the one-on-one conversations, the small group conversations. You get all the fun, messy, unique, sticky bits of cool things. And then when you distill them, it's honesty, perseverance, like nonsense that, like, if you know that you don't want that, you can also make sure you're working towards not having that. Maybe we want statements, we want whatever. So like, anyway, I think it's really hard work that you're embarking upon, and the organization's lucky to have you leading it. But those are some random thoughts. I like questions like, who are we on our best day? What's unique about working here? Those things. I think, again, that stuff's obvious. But to your question of the accountability, I think accountability isn't something you can get up front. But what you can do is you can work on what are the scenarios in which we'll use this. You can do the expansive work to try to get to something good. And then once you get to something, have people, do you commit to this? And if you commit to it, then you can work on accountability mechanisms to live into that commitment. So.
Yeah, definitely. I love the point about making sure that we're acknowledging the stuff we don't want as well, because I think that's part of what's driving this is, you know, for anyone who works in kind of real estate or real estate development space, it can be a tricky space to exist in. You know, we're founded by urban planners, and kind of the mission of the company, and the mission of the company won't change, is to make cities better. But what people think when they see an analytics platform for developers to use is, great, more condos, you know, more gentrification, more kind of housing displacement. So it's really helping to kind of anchor this back into, no, that's actually, you know, we need to check ourselves, because the reality is that our data can be used in a way that is really not aligned with the values that we have as people or as a company. So having that kind of, that sanity check when we're developing products and rolling things out is going to be so important. So acknowledging that negative is equally as important.
And sorry, one more quick thing. I love companies' values that feel like they can only be for that company, and they really acknowledge the purpose of that company. So as a company that like is all about the specialness of place or the uniqueness of place or whatever that is, how is that evident in that, like, we value that for our employees as well, and that would read and be there in some way? I don't know, just another thought.
No, I love that. That's great.
Amazing. So first off, I'm so proud to say that we have a little bit extra time. So we're going to open up the floor to say that, hey, if you have any additional questions, feedback, and things like that for the pictures, again, I shared their pictures and amazing work that they're doing. We're not just done yet. We have a little time, but we will get you out on time as promised. So does anyone else have any questions for the pictures, resources, extra feedback? Because they're going to take the next week to really soak up all the great things that you shared and make progress on their idea, because that's what we're all about, is helping each other to take action. And feel free to come off mute as well.
So I have a question, and this is on Annette's feedback, that identifying sort of three groups of people who have successfully made a career transition, those where it hasn't been successful, and those who probably haven't even explored it. I have great luck identifying people who have made a successful career transition. How do you identify the other two groups? I mean, is it just send out like a email sort of asking for people to self-identify who haven't been able to successfully make a career change? I've been sort of hesitating doing that because it doesn't quite feel right. How would people approach that?
This is Annette, since I've made the comment. I don't think sending an email out saying, hi, for people who've not been successful in changing,
Right.
please email me and let me know. But I think
Right.
start some kind of a group within your company, like a chat group within your company. I don't know what platform is the best for that, but let's talk about changing careers or making non-linear career changes.
Okay.
And then you're going to get more, you might get more real life scenarios than you'll get by only asking people who've been successful, and only asking people who maybe had a sponsor, maybe had a mentor, maybe had someone to help them. I mean, that's fairly obvious. Those people are going to make those changes, but getting the real story from people who've been blocked in some way from making
Right.
those, maybe it's because, your expertise is so important to this organization that we're loath to let you go and we want you not to do this. Or maybe it's something that is, more difficult. We don't want anybody from our group going to this other group because, we're competing groups and that makes things different. You don't know until you actually start to ask those questions of people.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Anyone? Oh, Chris shared a great one. Feel free to add additional questions if now it's your turn too. If you have questions for any of the comments and feedback and resources. Chris shared, Emma, one of the challenges of the endeavor like yours, especially when you really want to involve lots of people, it's just great. Just the logistics of collecting everyone's ideas, synthesizing them, feeding things back to folks managing all the information in a useful and meaningful way. There are some models to do this type of work that comes from collaborative resource, from crowdfunding process, even the government. Shocking, I know. That might be helpful. And I'll share some links up for you that might be useful. Yeah, so please feel free. Afterwards, you can meet on the Cultivators Slack group and exchange from there. So that's great. Hopefully you guys will be able to continue that conversation and relationship. Pictures, any questions from you guys and gals and everyone in between? All right, well, now we want to invite everyone to come off mute and give a round of applause to our amazing pitchers. Thank you so much. You did a wonderful job. And I know that Zoom meeting, you missed that applause experience, so here we are. And looks like we'll be able to wrap up a little bit earlier. As before you go, please, we invite you to join our Slack community here at Cultivators. Really excited because these are the kind of conversations that we have on Slack, and be able to share a lot of the ideas, resources, and make these wonderful connections to help you make progress on your ideas. As a reminder, we're really excited to see everyone both on Slack as well as the follow-up idea. So if you're curious on which pitchers took your feedback to heart and applied it to their idea, please join us next Wednesday at 5 p.m. on Zoom. Everyone will be invited to it, and we're really excited. Oh, John says maybe next time we could do it on TikTok and Fortnite. I'm not used to any of those platforms, so you may take lead on that. Let's connect after, because I'm not as young as the space is telling you. So I'm not as cool with all the hip new things. So we're really excited. Thank you so much for everyone for joining. Thank you again to the pitchers. Hope to see everyone on Cultivators. Have a great evening, morning, or wherever you are in the world. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Melissa.